So hello everybody and welcome to the Brexit webinar from the BIA for July 2019. Thank you for staying with us if you've been with us since the very beginning. It's 104 days till Halloween and Laura Collister is with me. So what we're going to take you through today is an update on what's happening in the UK, particularly no deal planning, some of the shenanigans in Parliament and government, as well as what's happening with the opposition parties. We've got some updates on what's happening at a European level and an update from us on what we're doing and helping on this process, and then there'll be a chance for questions. We did do this a month ago, and I hope that anybody who finds it useful can remind colleagues these go onto our YouTube channel, and I know many people dig into them at a time of their own choosing. Now will be the time many people here will be heading off to the beach, and I'm told that these do work fantastically, although do wear sunshade if you are using the BIA webinar on the beach. And just to destroy your summer holiday season, there are lots of key dates coming up in terms of activity, and the first few are next week. So in terms of Brexit and the life science sector, we have a meeting with our key ministers in the UK on Monday. This is the EU relationship group, which will happen just before both the results of the leadership elections of the Conservative Party and the Lib Dem Party, which is Tuesday. We're expecting Wednesday to be an exciting constitutional day. Prime Minister Theresa May does her last PMQs. The Conservative leader, winner, goes to the palace to be asked by the Queen to form a government, and then very soon after that, on Thursday, Parliament goes off on holiday. Now, the reason this matters, and I'm setting this timescale out, is we'll talk a little bit here about what might happen through the 100 days between now and October. And it's useful to have in your mind that at the moment, Parliament is scheduled to return the week of the 3rd of September, but then usually goes off for a little break in the middle of September while the political parties go off and have their conferences in the UK. And Laura's put the dates up here of the Libs, Labour and Conservatives, and then Parliament comes back. Now, that may or may not happen depending on the new administration, where we are with planning towards Brexit. But I think it's useful to have an understanding of this, because as Parliament comes back, there's then a European Council meeting, which could be the make or break date before any Brexit. We've obviously got the October 31st deadline, and then the formal processes when the European Commission takes office from the 1st of November. So these are some of the timetables that we're looking at, and as you can see, it's sort of fast, perhaps slow in August, then quick, really through September. And if there were to be any interruptions to this, which there may be, this is sort of what we're working towards. As you know, I always like to remind everybody that actually, come what may in Brexit, the UK remains a global leader in biotech. World's third global cluster, home to 3 of the top 5 universities of preclinical, clinical and health sciences, a leader in cell and gene therapy, genomics and AI, and looking very good in terms of funding for the sector with a pragmatic regulatory regime with a strong reputation. And you may have seen this week, we've done a new report on cell and gene, which is on our website and also on the website of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, which gives a good map of the UK's advanced therapy medicinal products landscape, or cell and gene therapy landscape, which again shows that the UK is in a very, very globally leading position. On Brexit, sometimes people say, what are you advocating for? And we have been consistent, really, thanks to the desires of our members for nearly 3 years now around this, since you helped us put this together nearly three years ago. We want a close regulatory partnership between the MHRA and the European Medicines Agency to make sure that medicines can continue to be supplied to UK patients and European patients from whatever happens in Brexit. We believe that there's benefits to that close regulatory partnership in terms of rapid and effective patient safety and public health systems for everyone. That we think that there's a benefit in terms of the clinical trial environment for UK patients to be able to continue to participate in those, particularly in the R&D of new medicines in the space of rare disease, where many of these networks are pan-European. Like any business organisation, if we can avoid duplication of unnecessary red tape, we're always in favour of that. and we believe it's in the benefit of the life science industry in the UK. We're also keen on the movement of people, the maintenance of brain circulation, and the people who make our industry as fabulous as it is. And those people come from all around the world, although many of them travel easily from the EU at present, and anything that makes that more difficult, we are again, and things that make that easier, we are for. And ensuring that there isn't disruption to R&D, both in the academic setting or funding for that, either in the academic setting or in the business setting, is very, very important for us. It's vital the UK continues to participate at Horizon 2020, and if you follow that debate in the form of the science debate, you'll have seen the Royal Society make some strong interventions on this week. Horizon Europe also, and EIF, EIB, European Investment Fund and European Investment Bank are very, very important players in underpinning some of the venture capital that supports innovative life science companies. So those are our core positions, and I thought I'd go through them again just in case you've joined or new to the Brexit debate as to why we're advocating for those. And they remain strongly supported by our members, having been built by our members several months ago. Now I'm going to turn to the UK update and focus a little bit on what's been going on in terms of no deal planning. Laura, perhaps I can ask you to give us an update on the latest from ministers, and then I'll explain how I've asked you to approach this.
Thank you. So the next few slides have a huge amount of writing on, and I'm very happy to share these slides with BIA members if you don't have the time to write everything down you want, or look for the links. So on the 26th of June, there was a written ministerial statement which came out from David Lidington from the Cabinet Office. This contained the key areas for our sector. So basically, it said government is therefore undertaking steps to secure freight capacities for supplies of goods. It confirmed that medicines are included in category 1 goods along with medical products, veterinary medicines and some chemicals. It also said that the Department of Health is looking at setting up an express freight contingency arrangement to support supply of both medicines and medical products. This would be an urgent contingency measures for products needing urgent delivery. And it also talked about Department of Health putting in place a freight capacity framework agreement to give other departments the ability to secure freight capacity for critical supply chains.
So Laura, that last one was from the Department of Transport rather than the Department of Health, the freight capacity framework, the Department of Transport?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the way I sort of asked you to have a look at this was, is it the same as what we were asked to do last time around ahead of no deal? And is there more detail, less detail? How's it changed, or is it the same? Maybe that explains how you're going to frame the next couple of slides.
Yeah, sure. So also out on the 26th of June was a letter from government to the companies that took part in the contingency planning programme for the potential March no deal.
And that's the one you've put here on the right-hand side of the screen.
On the right-hand side. The link to the government website is on the right-hand side. And then we looked at the 2 letters that went to industry from government for the March no deal. Those are both referenced on the left-hand side. So there was the first one in August 2018, which talked about a minimum of 6 weeks additional supply in the UK over and above business as usual operational buffer stocks. And the second one talked about, came after that in December, when it talked about borders and the need to ensure that there's sufficient roll-on, roll-off freight capacity. The letter to industry for the 26th of June provided more options and potential flexibility, but then equally asked an awful lot more of industry. So it asked companies to look at preparing with a mix of different pieces. So looking at rerouting freight away from the short straits, stockpiling, and as a default recommended 6 weeks. And then looked for assurances on the readiness of companies' logistics and supply chains to meet new customs and border requirements for both import and export. This is called trader readiness. This is the completely new element that we hadn't seen talked about before. And government said it would sort of look at how companies prepared through a mixture of those three elements.
So in a sense, there's a little bit of a bigger ask on companies here, particularly about understanding supply chain readiness, and they're thinking about how they deal with challenges at the border, particularly the short stays border, differently this time to last time. So the big message here is it ain't the same as last time.
No,
and you've got to look at the detail.
No, and sorry, they're very long links, but the three letters are referenced there. Also looking at the ferries. So when they talked about the ferry routes for companies for the March no deal, looking on the left-hand side, there was a written ministerial statement on the 25th of February, which talked about companies running for the next 6 months and highlighted the routes. There is published on the 28th of June a prior information notice, which said, provided some detail and said that suppliers were securing, they would be doing a tender for suppliers to secure a place on a framework to have the opportunity to take part in a call-off, mini competitions or direct rewards awards of freight capacity contracts. So a little different to the February.
So the bit that I see here on the left that is after the list of where the nicer ferry routes, it says on the left-hand side, the government has purchased the tickets from the shipping freight operators and these will be sold at market rate. That doesn't appear in the one for this time round.
No, that talks about a framework.
Interesting.
For the opportunity. What there is this time round though is Department of Health published another public information notice themselves. So the other one that we just talked about is the Department for Transport one. Department of Health has express services, which as I mentioned before was in their written ministerial statement, and that's where if there is something that is needed urgently and this is meant to be a fallback, which as it says at the bottom, will need to be fully operational. So this is capacity. I think before there was something similar for medical devices, but not medicines, and this will now cover both.
Thank you. So again, devil in the detail, things have changed.
Yes. So in terms of timelines, I found this, I'm not an expert on government procurement. I found this on the website to provide some timelines. So the prior information notices are not invitations to tender. So the tender process hasn't kicked off. So when we're looking at timings, they need to start. There then needs to take anywhere from 29 days for those to be open. And then there's sort of a process of getting the tenders, evaluating them, and then a standstill period. So given that it's towards the end of July, assuming that the very earliest we would get some of this is early mid-September.
Yeah, so that's getting pretty close, and my guess is that the government will be really rock solid on running the tender process against the legal specification, given the suing of the Department of Transport last time round over how the Eurotunnel and ferry tenders were done. So I think what we're saying, I think what you've rightly laid out here, and thank you for finding this, is that actually there is going to be quite a lengthy process to get to know what it is that the government may have, and we may not see that until well into September because of the legal timeline and process they've got to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when all this came out, just to run through this very quickly, we did issue a rather long BIA statement. This is 2 slides, which basically we wanted to flag that we encourage members to engage in the process with government, and also highlight that it's also different to last time. We also stressed again that a no deal needs to be avoided as it will impact patients' public health and the sector. We wanted to highlight that making changes at short notice is not easy or simple. We have complex supply chains, they're integrated, and everything is regulated. We also said again, we said this before for the first one, and as we want to say again, is we should be under no illusions that ensuring UK medicine supply in a no-deal Brexit will be easy or smooth. We highlighted the duplication of red tape for the sector, And then finally, we also highlighted that we need to know what the Conservative leadership campaign's view to this approach are.
Yeah, so I think we've had the other complexity here, which is not only has there been issuing of guidance on this from various parts of government, but we've also been working in the context that we know the government is, at least in composition of the PM and who knows what else, going to change in the next week. So there's a degree of uncertainty. I can't say that the detail of ferry contracts for medicines have been the highlight of the Conservative leadership hustings debate. I think we don't have an answer to the last one as to whether the Conservative leadership candidates do support the approach that's there. Trying to do this in a little summary for members. I mean, one thing that we've not talked about here is MHRA guidance. Much of the MHRA guidance came out well in advance of certainly in advance of the preparations for no deal net last time round. That guidance remains unchanged and remains standing. We've got access to it up, and I've talked about it in previous webinars, and it's available on the BIA Brexit microsite. So that's still there. That remains the same, and in a sense is broadly permissive, enabling people with European licenses to continue to import into the UK. Department of Health and NHS planning, I think, has been detailed and consistent. Many of you who have engaged with that process, I think, under Steve Oldfield will understand where they've got to and understand the pragmatic and way in which they've built on, in a sense, medicine stock out planning processes. But the new bit there is the express parcels contract that we've seen added into the scheme. I think we have some confidence in that, and I will engage in that process. And thank you to members. We encourage you to engage with that. It's when you get to the broader transport planning, I think that's different this time round, and you can see that that's going to take some time to know what there actually is. I think on border paperwork and trader readiness, there is of course this new ask from government to the sector to try and assure this. This is difficult territory for us, and I think is very difficult to ensure because trader readiness in itself is complex. We've seen concerns from the trucking industry and others involved in freight forwarding. There are many hurdles which are new if there were to be a no-deal Brexit in terms of paperwork to get things out or back into the country. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I think it's very difficult for people to assure an untested scheme with lots of novelty in it working perfectly on day one. So I think that's a challenge. And I suppose my summary on this is that we've seen rhetoric by leadership candidates on no deal within the Conservative leadership context, saying, do or die, etc. And that's been ramped up very hard. But I don't think that if you look at the detail of the government planning in our sector, that planning has ramped up at the same level to make you think that the two are in lockstep. And that is important when you think that it could all change if there is a new Prime Minister, and then the question to that Prime Minister or to an incoming administration is what can be done. Obviously, I'm an eternal optimist, but I also have some understanding of what is practical in terms of the disruption or the changes that can be seen within an industry that delivers real products to real patients in a complex global supply chain and regional supply chain. What can be done in 100 days? I think we have to ground ourselves on that. Perhaps we should turn at this point to Parliament, government and parties.
Yep. So a Parliament update, which also actually goes back to the borders. So one of the things that the announcements said, they didn't give much detail around what was anticipated at the border. But last week, or this week, the Public Accounts Committee published its report into Brexit and the UK border, out-of-court settlement with Eurotunnel. The link's here if you want to read it in more detail. And I've just cut and pasted a few things that the document says. Specifically, in autumn 2018, government updated its planning assumptions relating to goods crossing the border should a no deal be agreed with the EU. And the worst case assumption agreed across government was that the normal rate of flow of goods across the short strait crossings could be reduced by up to 87% for as long as 6 months. In relation to October 2019 and a possible no deal there, the report also states that officials told the committee that the level of disruption may not be as great as it thought it might be last autumn. It also highlighted, I've not cut and pasted this very well, it also highlighted that ferry operators require at least 3 months lead-in time to introduce new services. And therefore, given the UK government is scheduled to leave the EU on the 31st of October, any procurement should be completed by the end of July for ferries. So obviously not quite in step with the process that they've had to go with.
And I think what's unclear from this is if they thought it was going to be disrupted by 87% for as long as 6 months, if it's slightly less bad than that in terms of their estimation, we don't actually have a figure as to what that estimation is, but it's unlikely to be anything massively different. It's not going to be moved massively, I don't think, in that time. So although they think it might be less disrupted, there's no confidence from the committee that it won't be disrupted at all.
No. Also in the world of select committees, Steve gave evidence a few weeks ago to the exiting the EU Select Committee, which was looking at the impact of no deal on specific sectors. So we talked about the pharma sector, along with Martin Sawyer from the HDA, they've made some conclusions, not lots of recommendations, but they've obviously understood the issues around integrated just-in-time supply chains. They have stated, explicitly stated, no deal is a leap into unknown, will harm the sector, increase risk to patient safety and affect the supply of medicines and could lead to price rises for the NHS. It highlighted issues around data, because with a no deal, the UK will be a third country. There'd be issues around clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, and the detection of unsafe or counterfeit medicines. So I think they're referring to the Falsified Medicines Directive there. It highlighted that whilst the WTO's Pharma Tariff Elimination Agreement would soften the blow, it's not been updated for 9 years and doesn't cover a wide range of finished products. This is something we've highlighted quite a lot to governments. If you want the report, the link is on the bottom.
So Laura, thank you very much. And this is hot off the press in the sense that this was only made public this morning. So Laura's done a great job in summarising an 80-page document in a couple of hours into the key bullet points. And I think my point on this is I hope you can see that this shows that the BIA with partners like the ABPI continue to advocate the positions that the sector has agreed. And it's interesting to see that Parliament, I think, is listening, and it's good to see some of the points we've been making for a while reflected in this influential report. And I'm particularly keen, I think I agree with them, that the risk of any reduction in patient safety from if the UK becoming a third country is unacceptable. Do you want me to talk? I should talk about this one. So yeah, so other things that are happening in Parliament. Sorry to mix the specific select committee reports. This is back to a piece of parliamentary business. There's a bill going through on Northern Ireland at the moment. You may have seen it in the news, but the core political point here is that we've seen the UK Parliament flexing its muscles to basically say that they want to be around during the period in the run-up to no deal, if there was to be such a thing, to prevent, to ensure that they have a chance to have a voice and intervene on matters. And the technical route they've used to do this has been amendments to a bill about Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland peace process. But the core political point here is that before the new Prime Minister has taken over, many Conservative MPs, 17 rebelled, including and some abstained, including 4 cabinet ministers, against the government's position, which wasn't to let this through. This means that it will be very, very tricky for an incoming administration to try and bypass Parliament in the autumn period, so September, October. Parliament is putting its flexing its muscles to be able to be around and have its voice in Brexit in the coming months, and that's really the importance of this. So I know that many in business always saying to us, well, what we want, Steve, what we need is certainty. And the thing that does for us is uncertainty. Can you help us with some certainty? So we thought we'd try and think about continuity rather than change when it comes to the new government next week. And Laura, can you explain the picture?
So that is the cabinet table with Larry the cat, who stays at number 10.
So it could be the longest standing member of the government on fairly soon. I'm not sure what portfolio Larry will be getting, other than mice. But yeah, so there is some consistency. So we have delivered. We believe we're delivering consistency here, and the government will continue with Larry as in the role of number 10 cat. But the Conservative leadership winner will be announced next Tuesday. It will either be Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt. And then we've seen some interesting contributions to that debate from our sector's perspective in recent weeks. I would point you in the direction of an article by a former Life Science Minister, George Freeman, in City AM, a London-based business-focused paper about the focus that he believes Boris Johnson administration would bring on science and innovation, with some fairly detailed concepts outlined in a piece there. Another former Life Science Minister, Lord O'Shaughnessy, who was kind enough to host the BIA in the Lords recently, has also written a joint article with Sir John Bell and Ara Darzi, again stressing the importance of industrial strategy, the success of the life science strategy. So I think there are voices within the Conservative Party intervening in the leadership debate, making the case that we would support around the centrality of our sector to the future of the UK economy. And who knows, but it would be interesting to see whether some of that is picked up by an incoming administration. So there's some points there and some flags there. I think the other, in a sense, the flip side of this, we've also seen some rhetoric and some discussion in the Conservative leadership election, whether by Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary when he was a leadership contender, or by Liz Truss, a prominent frontbencher for the Conservative Party, advocating a more free market approach, a lesser focus on industrial strategy, a lesser focus on some of the interventions that we would see as underpinning the success of our sector, and who knows where that will win out. So I think it's likely that we'll see quite a lot of things, and much of this will come in the flow of the second half of next week onwards into the holiday period. I think the BIA will do rapid analysis, and depending on what's happened and where, we will look to inform members as to the opportunities here. But we're confident the cat will stay there. Now, this is what everyone asked me: what could happen? What's going to happen? Well, who knows, is the honest answer. So lots of question marks, caveats. Never make predictions, especially about the future. So could there be a general election? I think there's lots of speculation that a general election could happen, even though everyone's saying it won't happen. But, you know, could it be called by the new Prime Minister to seek a mandate? Could parliamentary defeats force an election? Either of those are possibilities. Or might the new Prime Minister say deliver Brexit, and then with the triumph of optimism that will be flowing through the country, call an election to seek a mandate then? I think it's one scenario businesses need to factor in and think about. Could there be a changed Brexit withdrawal agreement, a transition period, if you like, a continuity of the sort of plan that the Theresa May government have been pursuing? It's certainly a possibility. I think it's, if you look at the rhetoric of the leadership campaign and the responses from the new European Commission, that doesn't look so likely at the moment, but it has to be on the list. Is there a chance of a no-deal Brexit? Well, that's certainly being factored in, I think, into the price of the pound, and there's certainly rhetoric around it, although we are strongly advocating that that would be the worst possible scenario for the sector, in line with our policy for the last 2.5 years, but we have to think towards that. A second referendum could be called. Nobody's talking about it, but we leave it on the table there. Or is there a rapid deal between a new Prime Minister and President Trump in the United States? essentially in the form of a heads of agreement or some sort of early sign that a free trade agreement can be done. We don't think a free trade agreement can be done rapidly. Could we be heading in that direction? Who knows? I think we remain alive to all possibilities. And one of the things I had to do a bit of a digging into is how easy and when would a general election happen if you looked at it. And the long and the short of this, which is scraped from the House of Commons library via the BBC, is there's a process for calling a general election, and it's quite hard to do it any earlier than the 24th of October if there isn't either the calling of it by the Prime Minister next week or the forcing of by Parliament on the Prime Minister next week. So and then you look at it, 24th of October, 31st of October become very, very close dates. But it's just a factor into that thinking about what's going to happen when that we talked about at the beginning. So basically, it's quite hard to have a September election if nothing happens next week. But perhaps October is where we're at, and perhaps this leads me to think that would there be the possibility for a delay from the 31st of the October date for Brexit? Possibly. We've seen delays in the past, and might one of the cases for that be accepted by the European Commission would be an election which might decide a separate future. So I think that for me has to be something that's a reasonable factor to consider at this stage. If you look at Theresa May as PM, and I think we put this in to sort of sum up her legacy, Laura, what was your thinking in terms of as we reflect back on Theresa May as she exits stage right next week?
So there was lots of discussion around the number of defeats, the contempt of Parliament, having the largest majority against the UK government in history, first to be held in contempt of Parliament, number of resignations, mostly due to Brexit, but then also there were quite a lot of positives about the Prime Minister. So whilst I wanted to sort of include what's been talked about, but also sort of focus in terms of, obviously it was Theresa May that brought in life science industrial strategy as a key focus for the government. It's led to the ability to have a life sciences industrial strategy. Life Sciences Council meetings have been held at number 10. There's been Prime Ministers, she's hosted roundtables at Davos at number 10. She went to Cambridge and did an event there. And then also what we've seen is probably from the summer of 2016, when we know that our sector in medicines wasn't a top priority, to in the last year, medicine supply becoming a cabinet priority, especially in the no deal.
So yeah, I think she has been focused, and we have done well. And this is the image that I think should live longest in our memory of the Prime Minister. She has been, in my view, a patient advocate for UK life science innovation. This picture of her meeting President Trump, not on the most recent visit, but the one before, you can clearly see on her left arm the continuous glucose monitor that she wears as a type 1 diabetic. And she's been open about this, and in the last few weeks she has invited children with type 1 diabetes to visit and been clear to them that having a condition like diabetes should not be a barrier to doing anything you want. And I think both as an adopter, an advocate, and a visible figure of technology that was developed in the UK, manufactured in the UK, she has been a champion of life sciences innovation, both as a patient and as a Prime Minister. And that's something that that we should remember and be proud of and thank her for, which I do.
So just a couple of quick slides on what the other parties are doing. So you will have seen that there's a new Labour Party Brexit position. They did this as a letter from Jeremy Corbyn, and he said that Labour would campaign for Remain against either no deal or a Tory deal that does not protect the economy and jobs. Obviously, the other leadership election has been a bit overshadowed by the Conservative leadership one. They obviously report on the same day next week. But given where the Liberal Democrats are in the polls and the possibility of a general election coming up quite soon, it's obviously quite important who the leader of the Lib Dems is going forward in the contest between Jo Swinson and Ed Davey. And then last time we had what can happen in the countdown to Brexit. So today there's 104 days to a possible no-deal Brexit. So last time we had the porcupine, but
so we haven't got time to get a baby porcupine.
No, but I kept the picture because it was so sweet. So things you can grow and gestation periods. We just missed out on the lion, but only by a few days. So it might be early. Guinea pigs have, since the referendum result, been born and died now, because it now happened over 3 years ago. And if there is a transition, we're okay for a baby walrus there.
But we do have the chance to grow our own spring onions in time.
We can have spring onions, yes, and Swedes.
And perhaps we should next time look at what you can do with some of the innovations in agri-tech to enable you to do that in an urban environment, or using hydroponics, which I think if we have a revolution in either agriculture or barriers at the border, might become more of a focus in coming months.
But not as cute as the porcupine.
No, that's a shame that we've lost the cute porcupine. Let's go from cute porcupines to an EU update. I'm sure there are links in some respects. So there is a new president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, here, and she's going to be a very important figure for the UK and the Brexit debate going forward. A couple of points from us here. I'm sure you'll see this, that she has some experience of the UK, having been a student here in the 70s, but also she's a physician by training and in a medical family. So I hope that she will bring some of that to bear in her understanding of the benefits and risks of the life science sector and health in this debate. We've got new heads of institutions happening all over the place. So all of these we will follow, track, and things are sort of getting back together in a new way in Brussels. And this will all be ready across the autumn in the same time as the Brexit date, ready to go on the 1st of November. So these are going on as we speak. And in the European Parliament, the committees are up and being established. And one point that we're sort of focused on from a UK perspective is the ENVI committee, which covers most of our issues. It does include UK MEPs, and you can see here from the picture, third down on the right-hand side, Seb Dance is the vice chair. He's a London Labour MEP. So I think what's interesting here is the UK continues to be fully participative in and a core member of the European Parliament, including on committees like ENVI, whereas unfortunately the EMA chose to bench some of the fantastic talent that we have in the MHRA some time ago, in the expectation of a no-deal Brexit some time ago, which hasn't happened, and that talent is not, in my mind, being fully utilised by the EMA, which is a shame, because it's not as if the EMA is doing everything that it claimed it could do. We've seen the delays to the clinical trial directive and regulation once again. We're seeing, the slowdown of some of the other work, and it seems a real shame that the UK is able to participate fully while still a member in things like the European Parliament, paying money in, providing expertise on the ENVI committee, but that's not the position that the Commission have enabled the Medicines Agency to take, telling them not to have the MHRA expertise in prominent committee positions, which is a shame, because for life sciences we need the EMA pumping on full gas, and just a bit of compare and contrast on that one. I'm going to finish off before I take some questions on what we're doing, what we're focused on. So we continue to make sure that you're aware of what's going on in no-deal planning, and make sure you're engaged with the process, and then reflecting back to government through meetings with ministers what we make of what's going on no-deal planning. I hope we help you be ready for whatever's going on, and we continue to make the case for continued regulatory participation, why that matters to the sector, why medicines are different, why the benefits to the sector and patients have continued close cooperation. And that's done next through the most formal group, where we'll be meeting ministers on Monday. Obviously, I imagine they will be focused a little as to whether they still have the roles that they're in on Wednesday, but nonetheless, we have a meeting coming up. We'll focus on the new Conservative leader, and as that man becomes the new Prime Minister, and be ready to highlight the sector's priorities. We're working on building a profile with new MEPs and the new Commission. We're planning an event for Biotech Week in September in Brussels. We've got our Brexit Lead Network, where many of you are coming together, members with us in the ABPI, to look at this in detail next week. We'll do another webinar. And all of our information is up on the BIABrexit.org website.
Can I just highlight the Lead Network? I was going to do a slide and I think I've forgotten. It's next Tuesday afternoon. If you want to sign up, there is a link on our website. Speakers will include from Department of Health around the medicine supply announcements, and there'll be someone from Institute of Government to talk about some of the governance issues with the new Prime Minister, and there'll be an update from 2 of the trade associations around for road haulage and for the ports to look at sort of what's happening at the borders there. The link, that's, as always, it's for ABPI or BI members only, and the link is on our website.
Thank you. Yeah, should be a good one, and I'm keen to get a real flavour as to how this is playing. I realise there's a Brexit fatigue amongst many of us, but interesting to get a sense from members before we go into this important period as to where they're at as well. So I think we've got some clarity on no deal preparations. They're asking more for industry and perhaps a little bit less from government this time round. Who knows what's going to happen next week? We will watch with bated breath for leadership change in the Conservative Party, but we will try and make sure that we stay front and centre as a sector. Parliament is not going to be silenced, I think, will be my summary there, and we are watching the changes at the European Union. Do please use the BIA Brexit website if you've got if you want the latest information, mainly that stuff from the UK, and it's got all the stuff that's still relevant from the MHRA that's been around for a while. One thing that I'd encourage you to put in your diaries is the BIA Regulatory Innovation Conference. It's going to come on 17th of September. We'll look at the Brexit implications for the UK regulatory environment, UK's global capability for clinical trials, how innovative medicines get to market, and Sam Roberts from the Accelerated Access Review, I hope will be able to talk you through some important developments in that space, how evidence generation in support of regulatory decision making works, and how the MHRA may work as part of the global innovation system regulation. One-day event, 30 Euston Square, 17th of September. Book now, and know that you'll come back to tip-top information on the other side of the summer season, and you can see where that will sit, perhaps in a very, very important time around Brexit. We'll try and make sure that the content there is bang up to date with whatever's going on. With that, I'll open it up to questions. Thank you for staying with us. It's been a bit longer today, but we seem to have not got any questions on the type in the questions box. So I shall consider moving on quite rapidly to get you to your homes and families, I hope, before the top of the hour. So what have we got coming up? Well, Lead Network, as Laura's described, 23rd of July. September the 6th for the next BIA Brexit webinar, September the 6th. So we'll take a break between now and then. We may update on the government and what's going on with the government through other BIA channels, but we'll do another one of these on September the 6th. We're together in Stevenage on the 12th, another Lead Network in September the 16th, and then our reg conference, as I've described, on the 17th of September, with a flagship autumn conference, the Bioscience Forum, on the 17th of October. Again, tickets are available and selling well. So those are our sort of things for the summer. If you're not a member, but you enjoy and see the value of an organisation like the BIA, do please contact John on this email. We'd love to hear from you, and we're delighted to have you in membership if you're involved in the sector. We've talked about the next one being the 6th of September. Do register now if you found it of use. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a good weekend. Thank you very much.